and let your thing upload. So don't leave right away. What's going on, everybody? Welcome to another episode of the California Underground podcast. I don't know why it took me a little bit to get that last word out. Probably because tonight is going to be a big night talking about COVID. It's probably something that hasn't been talked about recently, but it has been 3 years. Yes, it has been a full 3 years since that initial 2 weeks to flatten the curve announced here in the US and all over the world in California. And we all probably some of the most life changing, scary, insane our lives. And I think that's basically what we're here to talk about is this nice roundtable of guests we have tonight to go over all of that and go over our experiences. What were the craziest things we saw? What were things we can't believe that actually happened? Did we learn anything 3 years later after COVID, or are we still sort of the same thing? I guess the new hotness is there's a fungal infection that's making its rounds through the United States. I just saw, so that's the new scary thing. It has landed in California. Hopefully, it's not the next state of emergency. But anyway, let's move on to our guests. First off, we have our old friend Natalie, who's been on the show to talk about COVID, back to join us. Natalie, how are you doing? Good to see you.
Good. Thank you for having me.
Excellent. Zach,
Glad to be
you
here.
were here a couple weeks ago, and I think you were sort of on the show that inspired because we were watching videos and stuff about COVID. And then we were like, do you remember when they did haircuts outside? And it's like, I feel like I blocked that out from PTSD. So how are you doing tonight, Zach?
Good. And just, man, just right now thinking about all the little things that were just like, oh, this is normal. And you think now it's like, man, what were we doing? I mean, that whole conversation we had, literally, I kept thinking the rest of the night. Like I was talking to my girlfriend, I'm like, do you remember when we had we couldn't sit here, but 3 feet over we could sit here, and then 3 feet over we could, and just the
Yeah.
bizarre ways we tried to get, whatever. But yeah, I'm good though. 3 years later, man, it feels like it's been 10 years, but
Here,
yeah,
We
we
made
made
only
it.
for the
Yes.
we made it. One side of COVID into the financial banking collapse and the next
Oh,
fungal infection.
just
So
waiting for us.
here we are in war with Ukraine. So it's going to be great. And I co-host, the best and fastest researcher in the West, Camille. How are you doing tonight?
it. Good, good. I'm just glad to be alive because, I didn't think we would live through these last 2 years.
Yeah.
Yeah.
The
Well,
winter
that's
of
what they
death.
made
We
it.
got through that.
That's what they made
Remember
it
that?
sound like.
Here we
So
are, healthy.
why don't we go all the way back to the beginning and talk about everyone's like initial thoughts back 3 years ago in March when the world was very innocent and we all thought weeks to flatten the curve, 15 days to flatten the curve. Natalie, let's start with you. What were your initial thoughts when you heard the world was 15 days? Everyone stay home. Let's just let this, maybe we'll flatten the curve by everyone staying home. What were your initial thoughts?
Well, I have a special relationship with COVID, or at least the response to COVID, because I was very much on a different side of things when it all came down. But I was on board with all of it. I was worried about losing my jobs, which I lost on March 13th and 14th, respectively. I had two jobs and never saw them again. But I was willing to do whatever it took. I wore a mask in the grocery store, which was the only place I went, and I was willing to do my part, as they said. And I was as Democrat as you could get, and as liberal as you could get, and as leftist as you could get. So I was totally on board with everything, and it seemed like something that was unprecedented. So I wanted to do whatever I could do.
Zach, what were your initial thoughts when you
Oh,
heard that we were taking 15 days to flatten the curve?
well, it was more like you're taking 15 days. Just kind of like just hearing what our local and state and city or city and county and everything that they were saying. I could not believe. I literally could not believe it. I mean, I went to school for international relations, right? So comparative government and politics is me understanding how other systems and cultures work, and so I'm familiar with like certain rules of countries, but never did I actually think the way and the mannerism and the tone that these elected officials came at the public, I never in a million years thought I'd be alive to see that here. And so quickly did it just become, you know, right when they said 2 weeks, I knew that was BS. Right when they gave us a deadline or gave us a timeline, given all the scary stuff they were showing, they're like, oh, just 2 weeks. Like, no. There's something else going on. And of course, by me, insinuating like this is going to be a lot larger and a lot longer, you know, I forgot my tinfoil hat, but I was called a conspiracy theorist. Like 2 weeks was it, man. Like chill, like quit being, because it was day one. I was living in PB. All the restrictions came on the beach. I was going to the beach every day to get some fresh air, to walk after my gym session. So it was a part of my daily routine. And then seeing tape on certain benches that were already 20 feet apart and you couldn't sit between that bench but 20 feet over, it was ludicrous. And I was trying to make sense of it by having fun with it, because I couldn't take it serious. It was like, this is such a charade for seeing how far government can go. And you know, whether that was the case or not, it surely showed, let's just say the government got a lot of data from day one till even now. And so yeah, I mean, I'm kind of going on a tangent, but just that initial phase, it didn't sit well with me. I have a very healthy skepticism built into my DNA. So right off the bat, I'm like, I don't trust Nathan Fletcher telling me he cares about my health, or Todd Gloria saying he wants to take care of, you know, like that was already a red flag. So just that was difficult because everybody else seemed to be just completely on board. A lot of people, to where it was like, you felt like you were crazy, but you knew something, there was more to this, and you knew, like, I knew I was onto something. I just didn't know what. But it's easier to say now than then, because then you're getting bombarded. I'm getting death threats. I'm getting people telling me, you know, I hope your lungs fill up with COVID and you die in a concentration camp with your family. Very specific, because that one stuck with me. But just the DMs I would receive just because I'd go out to the beach and record, like, kind of like poke fun at it. Like, this is kind of silly, guys. Like, let's get out of this like daze or hypnosis that we've gotten put into very quickly, and kind of see how out of pocket a lot of this is. But yeah, that was I remember that week very strongly, because even at work, people were like, oh, you know, I'll see you next year. And like something didn't sit with me well, because I'm like, we probably will see each other in a year later, because this is just going to become massive. I just felt it, but you know, you don't know when it's happening. But
yeah, it was I don't think you had better foresight than I probably did. I was the hopeful optimistic, being like, oh, we'll get out of it then. Oh, we'll get out of it then. Oh, we'll be open by Easter. I was like, sure, why not? If the president says we'll be open by Easter, then we're going to be open by Easter. Camille, we actually, after COVID started, so I don't really know, like, what were your thoughts when COVID first started?
All over the place. Okay, so first of all, I have kids. One of them's asthmatic. I also have always homeschooled my kids. My daughter, my asthmatic daughter, I believe she actually had COVID at the end of 2019, because she will often get, during flu season, she'll get a flu and it turns to pneumonia, and it's a whole thing. And she was super, super sick, and actually lost her like smell and taste and all that. And when we went to the doctor, she did not have pneumonia. So I believe she had COVID already, but because she gets so sick, and we have to, like, we've been able to keep her out of the hospital, but we've been very close to getting her in the hospital previously. In fact, 2018, the hospitals were full and couldn't take her, and she was supposed to be hospitalized. That's a whole other story. The world wasn't shut down then, but she was like, when you're sick, stay home. I believe that. Like, don't spread your sickness. I always would get upset when people like have their sick kids at church and they're like coughing all, like, no, stay home. I'm all for that. But I mean, I don't believe in the government telling you to do that, but like common sense, stay home, you're sick. So we were like quarantined for like 3 months because of her, trying to keep her safe, trying to keep her healthy. And we had just come out of that in February. at like mid-February or the end of February or something. And so I'm also very introverted. I'm such a homebody. I hate people. I hate going out. I was like, homeschool mom, don't tell me, like, you know, I don't like people. You don't have to tell me to stay home. But actually, no, I don't agree with, like, I'm also rebellious. Like, you tell me not to do something and that's like, okay, suddenly extrovert Camille comes out. And I'm like, now I also live in Orange County. You guys we weren't as crazy here where I live in a pretty conservative area. And like our sheriff was like, we're not gonna cite you. They were trying to propose curfews and stuff like that. And immediately my sisters and I were just like, all right, fine, we're going out. We're showing up. You know, that's kind of how we were. But I was cautious because of my daughter. Like, as a parent, the last thing in the world, you don't want your kid to be hospitalized. And like I said, like with her asthma, it is pretty bad. She also will get a collapsed lung. She had to have surgery when she was firstborn, like all these things. And so it's like, for me, of course, I'm going to keep her safe. Like, that's my thing. So we didn't know, like, you know, we're hearing this weird lung infection, whatever. We didn't know all the details. So I was like, okay, I have to keep her safe. Yes, absolutely. But again, I've never, ever been one that's like, the government's going to tell me what to do. You know, I've always been, Phil, we've talked about it. Like, before it was cool, like I was one of those people, you know, trying to overturn bills, passing out get the signature collecting years and years ago, because I believe in parental rights. Like, it's my child. It's my job to protect her. It's not your job to protect her. If I need to keep my daughter home, fine. But that's not for any of you guys to do, you know? So that's where I was at.
Yeah, it's I think everybody went through something completely individual, and it's interesting. I don't want to liken. I mean, it almost is on the scale of like 9/11. Like, I think everybody kind of remembers where they were, and specifically because it's a big deal, and I think it's something hasn't happened in our country. Everybody remembers exactly where they were and what they were specifically going through. And I like that this panel has like we all have a cross section of like different experiences and what we were doing. I was with Yvonne at that time, my then girlfriend, and now what? And we decided the world's shutting down. We have nothing to do. Why don't we go down to TJ and have lunch? It was easy crossing the border. It was easy getting back across the border. Back when I had to walk across the border, she would just drop me off. And I remember I walked into if you've gone down the TJ, walk across, it's one of the pedestrian walkways. You walk up the bridge and you walk into the customs on the American side. There was nobody in line. It was very eerie. Nobody was in the customs. Everyone was just sitting there kind of staring at me like, what are you doing? And I was the only person in there. And I was like, I didn't think it was that big of a deal at the time. But like I said, I was a hopeless optimistic. I thought that we were going to get out of it sooner than later. I was watching all the press briefings going, maybe we'll get some good news. Maybe we'll figure out maybe we're not going to be stuck in this. I felt a point, and I don't know if you guys went through this as well. I did feel a frustration mixed with depression. Like, at a certain point, it began to feel hopeless. Like, I think it was like 3 or 4 months in of doing the same thing every day, which was you get up. I was home at that time. While I was working, business was slow. Maybe sit on the couch. We'd go for a walk, down in PB. Zack would walk down to the beach just to get some exercise. All the gym. Couldn't go on the beach. Everything was taped off. But I remember I got to this point. I was like, I think I said to her, I'm like, God damn, am I depressed? Like, this is depressing. Like, this sucks. Like, and I wonder how many if I felt that, I wonder how many people who were already struggling with depression spiraled them like completely out of control. I at least had somebody with me and life was fine and we were okay. Like, nothing was going bad happening to us.
Yeah.
But people who were like, that must have really sent them into a tailspin. Like, I don't know somebody who experienced that. So
yes. Yeah, I
she's
experienced
like,
that, and
okay,
it made me no longer a Democrat.
okay, talk about
No,
that.
I had a very hard time. I lived alone. I lived with a roommate that I didn't know that well, that I had met on Craigslist. And as I said, I was very, very reasonable in the beginning, because we had never experienced this before. And I tried to follow the rules and all of this. But once it became 2 weeks turned into 2 months, and then 3 months, and so on and so forth, I started to have real questions about it, because I wasn't doing well mentally. And then I would try to go to the parks around me in Los Angeles to work out, and they would be caution taped off. And it seemed crazy to me, because it was like in the sun, and it was 6 feet apart already, all the machines and all of this. And I would start to like tear down the caution tape just to work out, and then it would be up 2 days later. And it started to slowly seem to me, did not catch on right away, but it was like, okay, well, I'm trying to stay healthy. I have nothing else to do. I'm trying to stay physically and mentally healthy, and they don't want it to happen. And it was really hard for me. I didn't have a partner. I didn't have too many friends in LA. My family is not in LA. And it was really, really challenging. And everywhere I looked, nobody cared about other people who are struggling from things other than susceptibility to COVID. And that changed my whole life, because Democrats didn't care. And this is kind of tangential, but I had hated Donald Trump before that, and it turned me on to Donald Trump because of what you said. He was talking about opening the country by Easter, which did not happen. But he seemed to me to be the only person, and I hated him so much. I don't remember why, who was talking about opening the country. And I really needed to open the country. I really needed to go back to work for financial reasons. And also, which is another thing people forget, just for like a sense of purpose and mental health reasons, and a reason to get up in the morning, and for people to know that you're not alive or still alive, or you're sick, or where is she? Like, nobody knew. And I was just so isolated, and it was one of the hardest times in my life. And it changed my whole life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, we've talked about your story before, and your story is definitely, I think, similar to probably thousands of people who probably went through that and said, I trusted.
Yeah.
I thought that they had my best interest at heart. And then I found, nope, they don't. And that was one of the most depressing things about this all, was that, and that was frustrating to me, was that you could see the suffering of like everyday working Californians who were like, that had put like their whole life on the line and just started a restaurant like a couple months before COVID hit, and they lose everything. And like, out for the person who opened the restaurant in COVID, nowhere. They probably, they had to suffer from bankruptcy. People who made California, under the pretense that they had there is no job. So I running industry for several years, and my heart broke for all the people who were in the service industry who had no job, and they had no prospects, and like they were living, I know that style of like, you're only as good as this weekend's tips. And it's like, oh, we live till next weekend. And that's usually the service industry lifestyle. It's not like they have a lot of savings or anything like that. So it is heartbreaking. It's not only service industry, it's house cleaners. It's people who do a lot of these jobs that can't afford to lose them. We're suffering.
It was everyone. Because your job is essential if it's your job. I mean, I was deemed not essential, and it's absurd. Like, my job is essential to me. And there was zero regard, zero, because I was so on the left. I was so Democrat, but there was zero regard from all of those people for anyone other than the people who might die from COVID. There was nothing about, are you going to survive this financially? Are you going to survive it mental health wise? It was nothing. And if there had been any, I probably wouldn't be sitting here today talking to you guys, but there was none. And I was waiting for something because I was not, I was not rebellious and I was not on the right and I was not anything, but there was nothing, like no lifeline whatsoever.
So it's got to probably get you upset when you hear all these politicians currently campaigning about how such a good job they did saving the county. Because that's what we got here. We've got everyone patting themselves on the back, and it's like, when I started Fed Up with Fletcher in 2021, I had my own energy to keep that going, and I was paying attention to the policies and everything that was going on. So I had that already in my back pocket. What I didn't expect, but got for the last, still to this day, was a lot of people coming up to me, whether privately or in person, and sharing with me what they went through, how they got destroyed, how they lost everything, how they're starting again and starting from scratch. And like you said, the disregard that their local elected officials paid to them, when it's like, this is suffering too. This is me losing everything I've built. Where's the regard for that? Yeah. And that's why there's like a hint of sociopath or something in some of these people, because especially here in San Diego, you can't listen to 16 hours of a meeting hearing people pleading to you that your policies are damaging and destroying people's lives. And then you're like, is that all the comments? All right, let's vote this. No amendment, no discussion. Let's just lock things down, regardless of teachers, doctors, police, military, everybody you can think of coming up for the first time ever and giving everything they have to try and sway people that should be swayable to a degree, as they represent the public, but it didn't matter whatsoever. And that, to me, like, I started off the pandemic knowing this is there's more to it. This just solidified, like, oh man, these guys are just power grabbing as much as they can and are seeing what they can get away with. And then you add in the funding, and then you add in all the little like state funding and the COVID emergency funds and relief funds going into lobbyists and firms and, helping campaign re-elections. And you're like, oh, this was never about health.
No.
Well, yeah, especially what they started promoting when they actually got the vaccine for it. And it was like, to promote the vaccine, they were like, have a free Krispy Kreme. That's all. 2020 started out so weird in so many ways, even like unrelated to COVID. My youngest daughter stopped talking. She was 8 years old and she completely went mute. And she had kind of historically done that before for like a day or two. And we always thought, oh, she's just being stubborn. Like, it was a whole weird thing. But then after a few days in February of 2020, we're like, this is weird. This isn't right. Again, this is not related to COVID, but we were trying to find a therapist who actually had dealt with this before, whatever this was. We didn't know what it was at the time. But then we were also in the middle of switching insurance. And we finally found this therapist who had dealt with, it's called progressive mutism. And that's what she was diagnosed with. And you never know how long, it's just like an extreme anxiety disorder. And you never know how long they will stop talking. Like when I got on these message boards and started researching it, I'm finding people who hadn't heard their kids speak in like 8 years, literally. Okay. So she stopped talking completely stopped talking. So we finally find this therapist who's like, oh, I dealt with this with one other patient who didn't speak for like 3 years. And I got him talking, and we're like, okay. So we went, he was local to us. We were in the middle of switching insurance, but he accepted our new insurance and stuff. So we had one meeting with him, and then my daughter had one meeting with him with us. Then everything shut down. And so then he was like, oh, you have to meet on Zoom. And she sat here at my computer on Zoom with him with her head down and cried for an hour. And like, again, as a parent, like, gosh, that was like so heartbreaking. And I don't know if she would have been like that in person, but she wasn't like that the previous week in person. And it was just like, this is what we're doing to kids. Like
Yeah.
I kind of ranted about it yesterday. An entire generation. I had that same time, that same week, actually, a friend of mine that I had been friends with almost my entire life, my same age, had died, a whole tragic surgery gone wrong. He didn't wake up from the surgery. He was on life support and they had to pull life support, and he ended up passing away that same week that my daughter stopped talking. And so we went to his funeral, which then I reconnected with like a lot of my high school friends because we all went to his funeral and we'd gotten together that weekend. And then, so we were all kind of checking in with each other, and we were all talking like, we're hearing these rumors, we're going to shut down. So we're all, like, okay, are you okay? Is everyone okay? And then I definitely learned who my friends were, which were not. Everyone that I was friends with did not come out with me on the other side of 2020. Now, of course, you have those like long-term friends that you meet up with like I have them, but the people that I was hanging out with, they're not in my life at all. Because for me, I was going through this like trauma, if you will, this dramatic experience of my daughter just not talking and trying to deal with that, and then getting her the help, and then everything shuts down and people are being weird and they're having their so-called quarantine cruise, which is really just a fancy way of being like, I don't want to be friends with you, so I'm going to use COVID as an excuse to cut you out of my life. And I felt like I was like checking in with everybody and nobody was checking in with me, especially as I'm going through this experience with my daughter. And I'm like, hey, I'm here, I exist, do you care? Like, does anyone want to, like, not that I need all this attention, I don't mean like that, but like, could you maybe send me a text once a month to just see how I'm doing? Because, I was going to the grocery stores for my friends who were like afraid to go out, and they left me. I mean, they literally are not my friends because of my politics. And I'm like, I was your lifeline. I was checking in with you. I was making sure that you could exist. I made sure you had food on your front porch because you were too scared to go out, and you dropped me. So that was a learning experience for sure.
I think that's an experience a lot of us had.
Yeah.
Going into COVID with set group of friends and family, and then post COVID or whatever, we've lost a lot of them. I know I've lost some family and a lot of my closer circle, right? And and I've even had some of them try to reconnect with me. Some of them to reluctantly say, "Oh, you may have been right about this," and then others like, "Man, I'm glad I was paying attention," but the rest are just probably still running their mouth about me in a negative way. But that's what this did. This did such a psychosis on people.
I know.
To where it's like, I've been your friend for 15 years. I don't care. You're not facts. Like what?
Yeah.
Like what?
Like, it is weird because you're like, me, my heart. Like just because I don't align with you on that issue, we can't be friends now. It's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I lost. Zach, you're lucky that there are family members who've actually reached back out to you, because I've had family members who just cut me off and won't talk to me ever again. They won't.
Did
respond.
I say they reached out back? Did I say they reached out to me again?
You said somebody might reluctantly.
Friends, maybe. Yeah.
Friends or
might be a little
family.
Generous. Friends, more friends.
Friends, okay. But yeah, I haven't had anybody reach back out to me, like just disagreeing, and it was just like the simplest. It wasn't. I definitely wasn't like a conspiracy tinfoil hat, like saying all the the craziest theories you could say. I wasn't saying like COVID doesn't exist. It was a government conspiracy. I wasn't saying that. Like I acknowledged like people were getting sick. Like
of course.
I don't know if I got sick in January when I got really sick and they couldn't tell what I had, but I knew people were getting sick. It's not like I was sitting here going, it's all government conspiracy to take Trump down and stuff like that. I was basically just saying, maybe looking at the numbers, and I would look at the numbers every single day in California because they posted them, and I'd be like, look guys, our fatality rate is still less than 1%, and it's among older people and people who are obese, and we know like the people who are most at risk. So why don't we and let everybody else go back to work, get exposed to it. I don't know if this is allowed to say on YouTube. I think natural immunity is okay now. I think they've admitted that natural immunity is okay now. And I had friends and family who were, why do you think we should go back to work, and why do you think we should do all this. I got called a racist
Yeah.
because I wanted to have dinner at a restaurant. I was like lamenting about, I just want to be able to go sit back inside for a restaurant. I want to go sit on a pavement outside in a street.
What a
to
bigot
pay
thing
all
to
this.
say.
What a selfish person you
Yeah,
were.
what's wrong with you, Phil?
I think
Yeah,
I didn't
and
know
somehow
that.
it made me a
Gosh.
racist too, because I want to. But
How
so
dare you call yourself pro-life?
yeah, that's always the comeback is like, we're pro-life and you want everyone to go back to work.
Yeah.
Okay.
Pro-death. Yeah.
Don't even pretend like you care.
Exactly. I'm pro people who need to go back to work so that they can support them.
Yeah.
I'm pro their lives.
Yeah.
So I guess moving along down the line, like at what point did you, I mean, there was a point where we were kind of all in shell shock from what had happened, from closing it down. It was a presidential year. I mean, Joe Biden was campaigning from his basement. Odd year. Like it was so weird. I mean, I was the nerd who like was paying attention to a lot of local politics, and no one really cared about local politics. At what point did any of you guys start to finally go, to start paying attention to my local politics, and I'm getting frustrated with local politics? Natalie, I know you're up in LA, and they just seemed like they were off on like cuckoo land. Barbara Ferreira, like the public health director up there, she still wanted to like have mass long after like everyone else was done with it.
July of 2022. I think she's still talking about always bringing them back.
Yeah, she always
We're
threatens.
still always on one foot in and one foot out in LA.
I think it wasn't that long ago that she was like, it was like a couple months ago. She's like, it might be time to bring masks back. I'm like, are you serious? It's 2022. Mask back.
Yeah, it's true.
So at what point did you guys start to like follow local politics closely, with like these local politicians dictating every part of your life?
For me, it was summer 2020 in LA when I was told I was already starting to have some questions after being totally on board with everything. When I was told that I could go out and protest, but I couldn't go to work. That was the end for me. And that was when I left the Democrat Party and I started being concerned about what was going on locally too. Because I didn't have a car at the time. I would walk around LA and I didn't have jobs. And I would see what you said, all these mom and pop shops, everybody closed down again because of the protests or riots. And they had just been allowed to open again, just barely, and with all these restrictions. And they had to board their doors again and put up signs, Black owned, whatever else. And that blew my mind that I could not go to work. And I was being told to read like, whatever, white fragility, this and that. But I couldn't go to work. And I like really needed to go to work. And to your point about, essential businesses and, needing to go to work and all this, I all I heard from my Democrat friends was, not to paint them all with a broad brush, but all I heard from my Democrat friends was, oh, it's just, it's white women wanting to go get their hair done. And it's like, well, okay, well, who's doing their hair though? Like, and it's multiple people wanting to go get their hair done, but who's doing the hair? The hairdressers, and it was just, there was no regard for all of these mom and pop shops and everybody closing down. And that was when I wanted to know what was going on in LA. And I'd never been political before that. Didn't know anything about politics at all. Had forgotten everything from civics class in school. And I realized it was wrong. It was crazy what was going on in Los Angeles. It's crazy still, unfortunately. But that was the moment, summer 2020.
Natalie, question. Sorry.
Yeah.
You could protest like with BLM and stuff, but you couldn't protest the lockdowns, right?
Yeah. Floyd's death. Yeah. I remember being encouraged. And that was not just an LA thing, to be fair. That was nationally. I remember seeing articles in the New York Times. I'm sure you guys saw them. Doctors signing letters. Don't shut down the protests for Floyd's death. This is important. And it was like, and I was so on board. I was on board with BLM. I was on board with everything. But it was like, okay, is it an emergency though? Or is it not an emergency? And I support your right to protest, even though I kind of disagreed with what we were protesting here. But are we in a global pandemic or are we not? And they did not care. They didn't. And to be fair, they were all outside, so it probably was safe, which I think we knew at the time, but they weren't really saying. But it was just the hypocrisy of, let's gather en masse to protest or riot, because there was rioting going on in LA, let's be honest, but not go back to work at all. And it was like, if you go into a restaurant, it's like 5 people and the, plastic and everything. And that blew my mind. It was crazy to me.
Just to piggyback off of the protests. So that's also crazy to think that was fit in this whole COVID bubble, was this whole saga of what that meant, what it led to, what it, and like you said, like I over the last maybe 10 years, I have been unfortunately exposed to severe and disturbing police brutality videos and things that just right now get me worked up to see that, certain people are certainly treated in a certainly different way. And that what the Black Lives Matter movement essentially was trying to point out, like, I totally was on board with. So when they had protests and gatherings here, I went to them as well. In the daytime, I didn't stay at night when things I knew were going to get crazy. But like, I was right on board with supporting this. I was even on NBC News. They caught me in the crowd when I was there. But like you just said, what I really got caught up on is that the protests seem to be incapable of spreading COVID, yet the people who wanted to protest the lockdowns and mandates were super spreader events.
Yeah.
And they were very clear on demonizing this group going out in public together all at once, yelling, being loud, versus this group doing the same thing, maybe a little more intense, but no issue there. And that, again, it's just things like that. I mean, Phil, you asked, like, when did we start getting involved in politics? I mean, I started in 2011 at 17. So I've been kind of in this realm watching a lot of drama over the years, but seeing how this happened and the hypocrisy, like you said, it seemed way too, I hate to use the word scripted, but it just felt so phony and such a performance and the way they were trying to mental gymnastics to justify why this was okay in a pandemic, but this was not. Yeah. And I think like you said, many of my Democrat friends kind of were like, wait a minute, like there's something inconsistent here, but others seem to make sense of what they were being told. They seem to think protests were completely safe, but those are super spreader events, and they all want grandmas to die and whatnot. But yeah, the hypocrisy.
Yeah. Well, speaking of
grandma,
and you said like it's only about white women who want to get their hair cut. I mean, I guess that includes Nancy Pelosi, who was caught on camera.
Absolutely.
That's right.
I can't.
But also, what's her name from Chicago?
Lori.
She also with the haircut, and she had to come out and say, "Well, listen, I'm a public servant. I have to look nice."
No, Gavin Newsom was definitely getting his hair dyed and professionally done weekly. So.
Oh yeah, he never had his hair out of place.
No, he's not a hair out of place ever.
Nancy Pelosi definitely got her roots did and all that.
This is embarrassing. I didn't even know Gavin Newsom was our governor. Like, I was so out of touch. I did not know anything. I like barely voted. But when that came out that this man was like in the French Laundry or whatever doing this, I was like, okay, that's it. I don't want him. I didn't even vote for him. I didn't vote at all. I didn't know anything that was going on. But this made me like perk up and be like, nope, no, to all of you, because this is crazy. This is crazy what you're doing. And it was so clear.
Yeah, I mean, let's talk about that for a minute. Go ahead. Let's go down this road. Let's talk about all the political hypocrisy that went on during these 2 years. I mean, you have Nancy Pelosi, you have Gavin Newsom at the front of the country, you have Gavin Newsom going to Kabul in the middle of a state. I mean, there's so many examples of people who were engaging in hypocrisy and they realize it away like, oh, it's because we have to do this or because we have to get out or I don't know. There's just so many examples of political think help their cause, and a lot of people probably scratch their head and say, wait a second. I mean,
like
the
Nathan
people who tried to
Fletcher.
defend at the French Laundry, that was some impressive mental gym to be like, well, technically, that county bad, like it's not in a red color system, so like that restaurant could be open, so like he's not breaking any of his own law. And it's like, that's not the point, dude. Like,
No.
you're telling everyone to stay home and not do stuff, and you're
Yeah.
having a birthday dinner with like 15 people. Like, isn't it supposed to be, what was the no more than
like 10?
4?
My God.
Oh,
It
okay.
was like, yeah, immediate household only, and make sure you are outside 6 feet apart.
Excuse me? Like, no, you're not gonna tell me how to have a freaking
Use
dinner.
hand
Like, these things are
sanitizer. Keep it to like an hour. You know, have fans blowing. Like,
And
if you can, put up a screen. Like, you know, just kidding.
yeah, they're telling people at theme parks, try not to scream too loud on the rides. Like, dude, what?
I remember that.
So are we gonna go to those extremes? Because I left my church when they. Okay, first of all, my pastor was here on a work visa from another country, so I had like grace for that. I was like, okay, I get it. He's like learning the ropes. He's new. You know, he doesn't want to get sent back. That's okay. But then when they finally did somewhat reopen, and then they were like, okay, we need you to register for church, and we're gonna have outside and some people inside, and we're not going to sing. And I was like, oh no, goodbye, no, we're not, like, no. That just told me, and I don't want to like sit here and like talk all bad about him as a person, but that just kind of showed me like who, as a pastor, like, okay, you need to open up your Bible, not the child sneezing, like not these government papers. Like, you're living in fear to man and not living in fear to God, and therefore I don't respect you as a pastor. I'm gone.
Yeah, but that's a good point about, there was so much of like, I don't know what past pandemics were like, but you probably didn't go in. It was probably, if it's either safe to go into a restaurant or it's not. It's not safe enough to go into a restaurant, but then you have to wear a mask and then take it off. It's either safe to go to the movie theaters or it's not. And I don't agree with shutting down churches, but it's either safe to go to church or it's not. It's like this weird, oh, okay, it's safe to do this, but we've got to wear a mask. And then when the vaccine came out, it's just very bizarre. It's probably not safe to do that if you feel like you need all these things. It's almost, I don't know what happened to people. It seems like common sense of like, no, if it's deadly, don't go out to a restaurant, please. It doesn't matter if you're wearing a mask and then you take it off and then you put it on to go to the bathroom. Like, there's no logic there. And I'm so bad at science. I failed science, but it doesn't make sense at all.
Yeah, if you can smell a fart, you can catch a disease.
Natalie, you don't trust the science?
No, I guess not. No.
And that's when we officially get taken off YouTube with that.
I'm sorry.
Right
I'm sorry.
there. And we're up, streams down. No, just kidding. Yeah, I don't know where I was looking at crazy things people were doing during COVID.
Yeah, are you
I wanted
maybe
to,
we
so
should
I
let
wrote,
you read those stories. Oh,
Zach's got some stuff.
Maybe we can. One thing I thought was crazy, and it was a string of events. So it started with the county in the San Diego County on August 31st, 2021, where Fletcher and the board passed misinformation is a public health crisis. Right. And this is where they were going after those voices that were questioning the rhetoric or questioning the narrative. And this to me I got very, very personal with this one because, you know, my mom, and I'm at liberty to share with her permission, but my mom took a flu vaccine at the time, and it severely paralyzed her from the waist down. Now, she went to UCSD. They tested for like several weeks. They had all these specialists come in, try to figure out what was wrong with her. They concluded and wrote in paper, I have it with me in my wallet. They said that it was the flu vaccine that caused this reaction to your body. She was diagnosed with GBS, which is Guillain-Barré syndrome, which is a nervous system. It's a lifelong nervous system issue. And they said to stay away from the other vaccine because of the similar components and why it may not be advisable for you given what just happened to you. So that's pretty clear, simple, feels like that's not kind of crazy direction from somebody, especially a health professional. And then I turn around and my county is telling me that stories like my mom is BS. They're made up. They're conspiracy theorists. There's not legitimacy there. And watching him deny my mom's suffering, who I thought I was going to lose, my single parent mom, I thought I was going to lose her, while Nathan is out in Big Bear at the freaking Petco Park. What was the Garth Brooks concert? Right? He's just being a hypocrite all day while also trying to lecture the public on what's real, what's not real. That got me going. Come to find out, go back to what many of those people were saying. The county was spewing misinformation actively. If that's how we're going to determine what's misinformation or correct information, go back today and go look at what the county was trying to say to people. Like, they were the biggest proponents of misinformation. So that, I feel like, is something they don't want to go back and look at because they are filled with being wrong left and right. That led to November 21, where because the people were pissed off about this new declaration, the public was speaking more and more at the meetings. Well, what do you do when you don't want to hear the public? You limit their speaking. So they passed an ordinance to cut speaking from 2 minutes, 50% to 1 minute, which is pretty significant when you're up there talking constantly. Like, when you take someone's whole minute away, it's bigger than just, a minute, 2 minute. No, that's a big deal.
Yeah.
And then the city of San Diego passed an ordinance that said you must be new hires, current hires, elected officials, board members, and volunteers must all be vaccinated with COVID, with the vaccine before doing any work with the city. And when they said that you can't run for public office without being vaccinated, like, that is like, there is clearly a game underway. I mean, this is a year, almost 2 years into COVID, and it's like they're pulling these types of stunts because they know there's power in that. They know the factions that are vaccinated are not, and they know, hey, we can literally eliminate half the people if we put this new restriction that we know many of them didn't comply with. We knew at the time, I feel like most people knew, like, well, this is unconstitutional. Like, this isn't going to stand. This is completely this is wrong. And yet they confidently champion those policies up until the courts sued, or up until the courts ruled off of Reopen San Diego's lawsuit against them. Like, I don't know. I'm kind of rambling because it blows my mind the audacity that our city went to try and control things. And it's the silver lining, as Natalie, when we were speaking earlier, the silver lining here is that they lost in court, right? And the city had to backpedal off of those mandates. And it's like, damn, why wasn't anybody listening to the people sounding the alarms when they were trying to pass this? It's like, oh, now it's okay to agree with how crazy this is. But when it's happening, people don't want to hear the criticism or like well, wait, they want to react. And I think that's how a lot of things got passed, is by people allowing the quick reactions to kind of cognitive kind of confuse them. And they're just like, fine, and it's like, when people were questioning, those people were called crazy or uneducated or science deniers or whatever. And I mean, you're losing in court, so clearly somebody was right at the end of the day. But I feel like a lot of damage has been done since. But yeah.
And I mean, as far as controlling things, to this day, as far as I know, to be an election worker in the county of LA, you have to have proof of vaccination to watch the polls. So I feel like that's taking out a certain group of people that you might not want to watch the polls. But that's just my own theory.
That definitely screens who's going to potentially be poll workers up in LA. For sure.
Yeah.
So I did put out a call to all my follow Q&A to ask for some weird stuff that happened during COVID, and I got a lot of stuff. So we'll see how. Oh my gosh, I'm looking through it all right. I'll try to get through as much as possible. Let's see.
My brain already
dining
hurts.
in plastic and covered in feet of snow, warmed by outdoor heaters. Yeah.
Oh,
someone made the
my-
joke about how we somehow were supposed to dine outdoors, and then they created 4 walls and plastic and heaters in those. We're dining indoors, outdoors.
extended
So
buildings now.
gross.
Yeah, it was extended buildings. I definitely remember that, and I thought this makes no sense because we're basically still indoors, but not indoors. Indoors. Let's see.
Well, if you don't think about it, it makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, just don't think about it, and it'll
Yeah.
make perfect sense. Temperature checks for socially distanced out
Oh yeah.
walk on the beach, but no stopping. This one, I actually.
Oh my god.
My wife brought this up to me. We were talking about it the other day, and I was like, "Is there anything you remember would be a good topic?" And she was like, "Remember when they finally let us back on the beach, but you couldn't stop? They were like, keep it moving, like really in their trucks, like yelling at people, like, don't stop, don't sit down. It doesn't matter if you're sitting down all by yourself, not surrounded by anybody, and within like 100 feet of you. They were like, nope, can't sit down."
I
That
saw
was-
that first person, the quads on the sand chasing after people, like yelling on their microphones. "Ah!" It's like, dude, this is like a movie set. Like, there's no way.
Like a bad SNL skit or something. Like it like reminds me of, which was it, like Mad TV or SNL, where like he's like barely just sitting in the spa and the lifeguard's like, don't splash, you know, like
Well, there was a point where Garcetti said, "Stay on the dry sand, but don't go on the wet sand of the beach."
the wet sand.
That also happened. I don't know the science behind that at all, but that.
Well,
Like,
that's the same
here-
guy that said, "Hold my breath," right? When I took
When he was at the baseball game or something, yeah.
Football, yeah.
Wasn't it like the West Coast, the water was unsafe, but on the East Coast, the sand was unsafe, but the water was safe. So it was like,
Oh my gosh.
we could be on the sand here, but not there. You could be in the water there, but not here. Like the science was adding up. Sorry, I'm going
Yeah,
back to science.
no, Nathan Fletcher had an online discussion tweet with people. I think he still has it up for some reason. Of
Nathan
him
Fletcher.
trying to explain to somebody about why, certain kayaking is safe out there, but paddle boarding is you got to be careful. Like he sounded like a lunatic, but was dead serious. And it's crazy. It's funnier to read today, but
It is. I mean,
it was
it's
funny
easy
back
to
then.
laugh at now, but it was.
Yeah.
I'm really I'm not smart at all, and I'm really bad at science. And I just feel like I need somebody to explain to me, because I'm so dumb, how you fell for this. Like, to me, it was so clear. Like, I don't even know the science behind it, but I can just tell you that for sure, walking on the beach is okay. And it was like instinctual. And I don't understand how other regular lay people just didn't really see that. I don't know.
Yeah,
I forget how I worded it, but I had put on Facebook, I was like, today I can go and get an abortion and go buy enough alcohol to kill myself from Costco. And then I could go get chemicals injected in my forehead to get Botox, but I cannot get my hair dyed. It's the science.
Yeah.
And I was like, can someone please I'm just looking for the science. I want the peer reviewed. I want just show me the science and I'll trust it. Just show it to me. But I just want to see it.
Yeah.
I remember there was somebody, I may this, but early on, they didn't want people going in the water because they were afraid that COVID may be in the water coming over from China. Like, I don't know, remember I saw that they were like, that's why you can't go in the water on the beaches, because it may have COVID. COVID got in the water in China and floated all the way
like
over
9,000 miles across the world.
And not to mention it probably, the current goes up through Japan, it goes up around Alaska in freezing cold temperatures where viruses can't live, comes back down the West Coast. Somehow COVID still survived that 12,000 mile trip and is just polluting our water.
Natalie thanks you for explaining the science.
That was the science.
My favorite too were the people that kept their mail and delivery packages, like they would sanitize them in the garage and then leave them for a week because they didn't want to bring COVID in their house.
Oh, the people who we were talking about, like the people who would sanitize their to-go and their groceries had like corners of their house where Amazon packages would go, and they would just leave them there because they're like, well, if you wait a certain amount, die off the packages. And I was like,
Sure. Like, whatever.
Someone told you that's how you're supposed to do it. One of the craziest things I saw, and Yvonne, she sent it to me, and I just said, no, we're not doing this. It was a diagram of when you get into the house, there's a square, and you step into the square, and you take all your outside clothes off. You immediately throw them in a hamper, and you have to put clean clothes on because the out have a lot of COVID sticking to them. So you have to wash them. And I was like, no, we're not doing that. That's absolute insanity. I mean, I didn't know this.
Family who did that.
Sounds like lice. Like you have to like, you know, like put it in the trash bag and close it, suffocate it.
I knew somebody that literally anytime they would travel to their parents' house, they would have to go into the garage and get like chemically sterilized. And he even made TikToks about it because he thought it was funny. But it's like, she was dead serious about it. She was like, you know, screaming at him because she didn't know she was getting recorded. And she's like spraying the clothes, throws it immediately in the washer, sprays inside the washer, closes it, wipes the, you know, washer machine. I mean, it's like, it was, man. Like
I'm just now realizing I missed a golden upload a sound effect of Dr. Fauci saying the science and playing that every single time we talk about this.
We'd get canceled for sure.
It's for
Zack just reminded me of the TikToks. You know, we're hearing that we're killing grandma, and everyone, the hospitals are just lined with people falling over in death of COVID. And the nurses are like, let's make dancing TikTok videos.
Like, get back to my family member. Like, what are you doing? Oh my
There's
God.
death all around us, but let's coordinate
let's
a dance.
Twerk.
Yeah.
All right, let's see
It's
what
not
other.
funny. Why am I laughing?
Because it's
Another thing,
it's
you know, I
crazy.
think
That's why.
Yeah, I think San Diego surprisingly shares a privilege here. But a big thing I know was big in LA and sort of down here was the vaccine passports.
Yeah.
So they really like, so Todd Gloria said on Twitter, he posted basically saying, hey, any business that first implements a vaccine passport, I will issue a city declaration for that company, like trying to give them an award for being the first company to implement their vaccine passport. Well, luckily we, you know, like I said, we're very privileged to have certain groups here in San Diego that just spoke up very loudly and protests physically at these businesses to where they backpedaled from that. But that's another thing that we were so close, and places actually did institute it. When I went up to Seattle during Thanksgiving, I tried to use the restroom on the pier, you know, in one of the little stores after I just bought food from them, and they would not let me go in unless I showed them my card. And it's like, I just bought your food, your overly priced food. Let me pee for freaking couple freaking minutes, or a minute. Just let me go. And they were like, no, we can't do that. Like, you know, you have to put your mask on, and if you even want to come this close to us, so like they were just super like, I want to use the, they were just very
No,
strict.
you're right. I mean, for a while in my city, I was not allowed in restaurants and bars, etc. And I will never forget that. I'll carry it with me for the rest of my life. And I don't think anyone should forget it, because in 2021, 2022, I was not allowed as a tax-paying, law-abiding citizen in restaurants, in bars, in other places. And I hope no one ever forgets that.
Yeah, the favorite part's when they said vaccinated people can sit here, unvaccinated people can sit
outside.
here. We literally had Jimmy Carter's Mexican restaurant on Fifth Ave. Yeah, I just called them out. They had this exact system where it was literally unvaccinated people are out on the deck by themselves, and then the vaccinated people get the cozy inside. And it's like, dude, how is this even exact? Like,
well, to any Padre games during like when they started to let people back in, but they had vaccinated and unvaccinated sections.
I heard
and Actually better to be in the unvaccinated section because they gave you a lot more space. They'd give you like almost a whole row to yourself. So it was like, sure, I'll be in the unvaccinated section because I get to spread out. I get all this room, and all the vaccinated people, you saw them like in the seats. They were all like right on top of each other. I'm like, this makes sense. Absolutely. So, and we're outside.
Yeah.
Let's see some.
Remember they filling up the skate park with sand?
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, yeah.
And then, of course, they were like blocking off all the playgrounds. My family, I didn't go, but my sisters and my parents had gone camping, and they were hiking during the summer, and they weren't wearing masks. And somebody on the trail came across them and like full on started yelling at them.
Yeah.
You know, you're killing us. And they're like, no, you could have just moved aside and kept going. But no, you wanted to make an argument. My mom was just like, your fear, your problem, deal with it. Not gonna lie, as a germ freak, I saw at a grocery store yesterday, they were still sanitizing the grocery carts, and I'm like, I'm here for that.
Yeah, they probably should have been doing that before COVID.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely.
I'm not
That was
opposed to
something.
that. That's a
remember,
good thing we learned.
Yeah.
Good thing we learned. I was like, I hope this stays forever.
Yeah.
I remember Trader Joe's in the beginning was completely ransacked. I remember like right in the beginning when we started the pandemic, like you couldn't get anything, and they were just, people were buying like as much as possible to the point where they were blocking off whole aisles, and they were like, we have to restock, like give us a half an hour to restock.
Yeah.
And people were like reaching over people, and they were like taking stuff, and like all the frozen food was gone. And for some reason all the fresh produce was gone, and I was like, I don't know what you plan to do if we're stuck in the house for longer than a week with all that fresh produce. But not fresh produce. Toilet paper, remember the run on toilet paper?
Yes.
Oh my god.
Yeah.
Toilet
That
paper
happened before
anywhere.
the lockdowns. Like we weren't even locked down when people were like, toilet paper.
Yeah, that happened immediately. That was like the first panic was go to the store, buy. You know, I was asking myself, like, does this give you like diarrhea? Is there a reason for all this toilet paper? Like, what's the like?
Yeah, that was a weird one. Like they didn't.
Yeah.
I guess people thought they were just never going to get out of their house. Do you remember that there was always these rumors of like, we're not doing it strong enough and we're not locking down.
Yeah.
So the next step is everybody literally has to be locked in their homes, and then will come around and bring you like rations every single day. Do you remember that rumor being propagated like around social media? That might have just been like a conservative thing. Like people were trying to scare you. Like, yeah.
I mean,
there was.
We all thought we were going to have like apps on our phone that we were going to have to check in, and they were going to track us. And speaking of Trader Joe's, remember it was safe to line up outside in crowds with no social distancing, but only a certain amount of people could be let in.
Yeah.
Yeah. I actually kind of like that because Trader Joe's can get kind of crazy. That they were kind of rationing how many people could go in. I was actually enjoying that a little bit.
Exercising with masks on outside.
Yeah.
Oh,
alone, being alone in your car with your mask on.
Oh, still see that today.
Phil, I know you have like a million responses there to get through.
Going through them and trying to pick out because some of them are like really long. There was this one time I was arrested for keeping my gym open. I think we probably know who that is.
We know who that is.
Yeah.
I wonder who that is.
Yeah.
Someone said having to bring your own bed sheets to a hotel. Remember they wouldn't.
Oh my gosh.
Hotel because they didn't want people going in and out of your room. Like if you traveled and went to different hotels. Yvonne and I were rebellious and we tried.
Yeah, my girlfriend and I traveled a lot. They wouldn't come in to change your stuff or anything.
But you had to bring your own bed sheets?
We did not. They had them, but we just had to sleep in the same bed, in the same sheets over and over.
Okay.
Both of those sound worse, right?
Yeah.
That's okay.
Do you get a discount or something?
No, probably not.
Oh my gosh. I remember posting because like I follow a lot of home decor stuff, and they, you know, all those dumb signs like that would just say something like "gather here." And then someone posted that. It was the funniest thing. And it was like, take it down, Karen. That's illegal. Like, I remember posting that. It just cracked me up. No more gathering.
No more gathering.
Jeez.
Kicked out of the Yorba Linda Public Library because my 2-year-old wouldn't keep a mask on.
Ooh, I don't know who that is, but that's interesting.
Yeah, that's, I mean, all those, we saw all those videos from the planes and all of that. And we were the only country, right? The only country in the West to, or the only country maybe at all to have 2-year-olds masked. That's something also to never ever forget, if I can say that.
The treatment of children was
that was bizarre,
insane. I mean, we won't know for many years.
No.
The mental implications of what's going to happen to these kids, but I mean, you've stolen like 2 years of their lives for this.
Critical.
And like what they went through. I don't know. And like the fact that they had to mask up and they couldn't, like, speech development and Zoom classes. It's just kids could not. I don't think we'll see it down the line. I think like 10, 15 years, they'll have a study and show like what was the educational impact on American kids by shutting down schools. And California was like absolutely the worst at shutting down schools because we have this incredibly strong teachers union that their demands were so ridiculous. They were like, we need brand new filtration systems and we need all of the air ducts taken out and we need like all these. It was like $1 billion of concessions to basically tear down schools and like rebuild them so they were COVID safe. And that was the only way they were going back to school. Like teachers basically, like, I'm not putting my life on the line to go back to teach kids in class. And it's like, okay, well then maybe we need to find people who in person and teach kids, which is why I think private schools and parochial schools and Catholic schools boomed during this time because they were actually open and public schools were not. So
yeah, I had an issue with the masking, the teaching with a mask on, because when I was a kid, I relied very heavily on the movement of mouth and watching the mouth when I'm listening and learning. Like I'm good at even reading lips. Like I'm very good at like paying attention to the mouth, and that's how I developed learning early on. So to think going through school, not seeing the teacher's mouth as they're talking, I'm not going to pay attention. I'm not going to catch everything I need to catch or be aware of what I need to. And it's like you said, a whole generation of kids who I'm sure have similar styles of learning out there were just completely evaporated from their lives. And now, like Phil said, like it'll be some years till we see what that caused, but like mark my words, we will see the implications of that.
My friend's husband is deaf and relies on reading lips. And so that for him, obviously, that it's extreme issue. And then even with like autistic children, when they're trying to teach them about emotions, they're teaching them facial what these mean. And so that's a huge setback for those kids who are learning those things, those, emotional cues and whatnot.
Yes. I work with kids with autism, and one of them had to drop out of school and go to virtual forever because she can't do the mask. And another one carries the mask with her to this day wherever she goes and will not leave the house without it. And it's just like so many little dominoes of people affected that you're right. We won't know for a long time of how this affected so many people.
I also wonder like the long lasting cycle. I'm trying to find the right word. I'm like psychological grooming of these younger because there's some kids who they grew formative years, learned that whatever the government says do and to trust the government 1000%, which is a scary thing. And I think that is really terrifying that like kids will grow up and the government has our best interests at heart. Of course they want us to wear a mask. It may be uncomfortable, but that's what we have to do because we're good people. And it becomes this like, they're then programmed to believe in this like collectivist ideology as opposed to an individual ideology. And that's going to like then form how they grow up in the politics subscribe to, if that makes sense.
Yes.
Like,
Yeah.
it'll be much more of a
School is
collectivist
already-
idea.
I mean, exactly what Zach's about to say.
Yeah, school is already like a kind of formidable, like follow here, line up here, it's already has that ingrained in it. Now that on steroids, you've got very much compliance, very much shaming other students, and you know, all of these little human dynamics happening with the youngsters are going to continue to carry, you know, stay with them in one way or another when they're adults, and they already are practiced running through these steroid types of procedures through school and COVID. So the next time the government snaps its finger, they're going to already have this like really ingrained because it's a part of their education as well. So now they're going to know exactly what we need to do, how we need to do it, what we need to do better, when really, truthfully, all of it was a disaster. But you know, you have to follow when you're in school. Like you're really tied to the system a lot more than you or I felt during this time, or you know, or any of us here. Like children are like, unless the parent has them outside of that system, it's the system on top of COVID, or the COVID on top of the system.
Yeah, I agree. I know I'm really thankful that I've always homeschooled. Not to shame anybody who couldn't, whatever. Like it's just for us, it was like, there's no transition here. We get to just kind of keep doing our thing. But like even like I remember my son's best friend, he was only allowed to hang out with his friend if they were outside wearing masks. And I didn't stop him from hanging out with him. He's older. My son is a teenager. He's like 17 now. So I let him, you know, have that choice. I'm like, if you want to go hang out with him and you wear a mask, like that's what his mom wants. So it's up to you if you're willing to do this. Like, I'm not going to be like, you will never wear a mask. Like it was just like, he needs to see his friends and stuff, you know, they need to be around their friends.
Yeah.
Indoctrination was the word I was looking for.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I was trying to figure it out. All right. Some more things that people.
Careful what you say, Phil. You're going to get yourself canceled.
Well, we'll just move over where all the cool kids are. Being forced to take a PCR test every week, exemption denied, breathing issues. I forgot about the PCR test. I remember Yvonne would have to go, she would have to travel for work to Hawaii, and Hawaii was horrible because Hawaii was like, you can't come in without a vaccine, without a negative test. You have to get a negative test like within 24 hours of your flight and then show it like on your way in. And remember the like tents that were, you could just pull up and get like a free PCR test. They would like shove it up your nose and then they would give you a free COVID test. Like I remember going to that, and it's just, I forgot all about that. I blocked out like the COVID test tents that were everywhere.
I forgot about that too. My dad he was essential. He had to travel with papers in case anyone, you know, questioned him.
Yeah, I did too. In order for me to drive to work, I had to carry certain documents that permitted me to be able to drive to work.
Wow.
That was like early on.
A rash.
Yeah, that was right off
from the mask. Like her face just completely got like a really bad rash, and she had a doctor's note that said she cannot wear a mask. Should not, will not, do not wear a mask.
Wow.
Directional arrows.
On the floor.
One-way aisles.
Directional arrows
my
were fun.
God, yeah, one-way aisles.
I mean, honestly, Costco on a Saturday probably needs those anyway with like blinkers on the carts, but no, that's so stupid.
I have to admit, I guess I was trained pretty well by Trader Joe's because we went in there all the time, and they showed us like, you went down the fresh produce aisle and then you came back around up the frozen.
Oh my God.
And then you go back down this way.
Insane, Phil, but again,
and now I go that way like every time I'm in Trader Joe's. I'm like a mouse that's been trained in a lab.
Like the dog tree in the bell.
I just go down and I come back. Because I'm like, this feels unnatural. I can't go down this aisle this way. This is
Yeah,
not
this is
allowed.
wrong.
You do have a form of OCD, don't you?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm just like, and now my wife makes fun of me every time I go to Trader Joe's. She's
Good.
like, "You want to walk down every aisle, don't you?" I'm like, I just feel like I have to walk down every aisle to get out of the store now.
I'm with Yvonne on this one.
So I've been
Just a
professionally
side,
indoctrinated by Trader Joe's. Yeah.
just a side thought. Do you guys think that people today, not everybody, but do you think there's a large population of people that are still wearing masks because
Yes.
of their insecurities?
Oh, insecurities.
Yes,
Absolutely.
Kids probably especially.
I feel very strongly about this because just, I mean, there's a lot of reasons, but it just feels like there is certain inclinations by those who I knew were already insecure to continue to wear the mask as like a security blanket. And I've even talked to people that say they feel secure, not just from COVID, but from the world behind it, almost like hair kind of hiding,
See,
like
that's not
emo kind of.
healthy.
No, not at all. But that's
I would have
it's
done
like
it as an adolescent. If you're, braces, your teeth, your acne, whatever else. I used to hide behind my hair when I was little. I feel like a lot of young adults, adolescents,
I had long hair
teenagers
down
probably
to my
do it.
shoulders, and I did the same
Yeah.
thing. So I know exactly.
It's not good. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not good.
I think it's honestly like a fashion statement now, which is weird. Like I see a lot of like teenagers getting out of the middle school and they're like still wearing masks, but they're not wearing them like correctly. They're kind of still wearing them like down and like
under there. Oh my
yeah.
God.
So it's like
Another
I'm
thing.
like, you're not required to wear that, but you're still wearing it. And I feel like it's just become a fashion thing now. Like people are just wearing masks for some reason.
Yeah.
Speaking
That's
of not
weird.
wearing them right, remember you would be wearing a mask and then people would be like, pull it up. And then people with glasses are like fogging up their glasses.
Oh yeah.
Oh my
Yeah.
God.
I've had people
just
tell
went
me,
through
put it
that.
over your nose, put it over your nose. Because I always like,
So they're still enforcing it like at hospitals and
In
whatnot.
medical?
My nephew was getting x-rays today. He broke his arm and he sends a picture of himself. He's 14. He sends a picture of himself at the doctor's office wearing a mask. And I'm like, bro, take that off. And he's like, well, I'm at the hospital. I have to. And I'm like, no, first of all, you're a child. Second of all, we're over this.
I think that ends on April 5th. I could be wrong.
No,
But-
Yes.
yeah, actually,
It does.
he's in Oklahoma. So that
Okay.
surprised
Oh.
me even more.
Okay.
It didn't like, it was like, I don't understand.
Yeah, I had to go through that 2 weeks ago when I was getting ready for LASIK surgery. I had to wear my glasses and I had my mask on and
Yeah.
it just kept fogging up my glasses. I was like, this sucks.
yeah.
I don't want to do this anymore.
This sucks. I'm getting LASIK.
And they're like,
Yeah.
good thing you're this is the place you get LASIK done. So
Yeah.
good news for that. I'm trying to find some other thing. Some of these are really sad and I don't want to bring it down because we're having a good time here. But yeah, there is some sad stuff, but I don't want to talk about it.
It's probably the majority of the stories out there.
A lot of them are sad. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah.
Someone said, all right, fine, I'll tell you one. Back to lighthearted.
Oh, yeah, now we're gonna get all sad.
My boyfriend wasn't able to parents while they passed away. They died alone.
Mm.
See,
That's tough.
terrible.
But I mean,
I had a
it's-
grandma who died alone. Yeah. There's
Yeah.
so much of that. Yeah.
how many old
My grandmother,
people couldn't feel the touch of like a family member because
Yeah.
of COVID?
I lost my step grandpa and my grandfather in 2020. Neither to COVID, but neither alone either, because my family isn't down for this nonsense. So
yeah, my grandmother passed away in 2018, and as you know, I've come to peace with this. And as weird as this may sound, I'm thankful she passed away when she naturally did, because she didn't naturally. It was she passed away from dementia. But to think of her going through that and us going through that with her during COVID, where they're telling my mom, who would punch a doctor in the mouth, to not see her mom, like I cannot imagine what life would have been like if I had to be in those scenarios with the loved one, because I could, I've heard the stories and it gets me heated because I think about my own family. I'm like, no, you're not about to prevent me. Like I'm going to jail because I'm running through this office building. Like it's just it's a hard one.
You just reminded me of women who had to give birth during that time wearing masks.
Oh,
and like,
oh my God.
I don't want to go like all like TMI on labor, but having had 4 children, you get to a part of labor where you're like, don't touch me, don't sit, like everything's really irritating. And they say a lot of women even are like taking off their clothes because it's like, just, they feel like constricted, like everything's just like bugging them. Like they don't want anything touching them and they're forced to wear masks. And I just like oh my gosh, I can't even stand the thought of them having to go through that. And like, that's horrific. That's so sad. And it's just like, and you do, like you're being taught before, you know, like that you need to be taking deep breaths and relax. And yet now you have this mask stuck on your face that you're not supposed to take off.
Oh, no.
I'm trying to find a good one.
And what, they deny you service if you don't do
I don't
that?
know.
You know? Like, what is like?
I honestly don't know what happens. My kids are older. I didn't go through that.
Someone said my cousin told me that they spent Thanksgiving with masks on, including the kids.
Wow.
That happened probably a lot more than we think it did.
I think I absolutely do think it did. We have some family members who in the beginning were very worried about COVID, to the point where like we couldn't see them like physically for a long time. Like we dropped something off for them at their house and we had to like drop it off on their little like path to their house, not like go up to their house, like to the path to the house. And then they were like looking through the window and they're waving at us and it's like, okay, bye. But they finally like cracked after a while. And I think they came to their senses and they're like, this is dumb. Like, what are we doing here? And that never happened, but
drive-by birthday parties.
Drive-by birthday parties.
I forgot about. Oh my God!
I attended one of those. We weren't driving by, but we were part of the VIP that actually got to be part of the party.
We were a quarantine crew.
By and like the kids with their masks driving by in the car and they were like waving. I'm like, this is so sad. Like, what the hell are we doing here?
Drive-by graduations.
Drive-by graduations. I saw that across the street from where we live. A whole bunch of people, kids, like they were just in their cars and they were all like honking horns and trying to make it as fun as possible. So
less depressing. Oh my God.
Yeah.
We had a local church that like did that for people. Like they made it fun. And my son had graduated 8th grade. Homeschool. He didn't care to do anything, but they were giving out free in and out. So we were like, sweet, let's go get some free in and out.
There you go.
That, but they weren't requiring masks or anything. It was just like drive up and get some free in and out. We're like, cool. So we did. Did any of you guys use COVID excuses to get out of things though?
Yes.
I was too vocal online to try to get away with anything.
Okay.
Yeah, people knew.
But for the rest of our lives now, you can just say I'm not feeling well. And I feel like that's a good enough. Because I never used, and I used to work in a restaurant, and they used to let me come in sick. Nobody cared, and now that'll never happen again, which is probably for the best. And I feel like now for the rest of my life, I can just say I'm sick. And what employer? I mean, I don't know. Isn't that we all lived through this, and it seemed to be a good enough excuse for 3 years. So.
I remember my entire office area all got sick before COVID. All of us were sneezing, everyone's coughing, and it's gross. It probably shouldn't be doing that, but it was like, no. Like, so what was the what was the solution on the? Yeah, they're just continuing on as they're. Yeah. And it's like, but now it's like you even so as to sneeze, people look at you and they're like, "You need to go home."
Which is not a symptom of COVID, but people still freak out over it.
That was like one of the first things they said was. Oh God, more misinformation.
Phil, what did you yourself
I was COVID. I was going to a church that was pretty left leaning, but the people were great. I had a good time there. I looked past the politics and I was like, hey, these are really nice people. Love the church, love the vibe. They were Methodist, so got over that. But it was, well, now that I'm Catholic, I can make fun of Methodists.
Different discussion, okay.
Whole different discussion. Anyway, so this church was very, very pro lockdown. Like, and they waited forever to reopen, which is probably one reason why I stopped going to that church and ended up going to the church I go to now, because my parish was actually open for service, which ended up good for both of us. And I remember they were like, "Oh, we're having this housewarming party. You should totally come." And they're like, just so you know, side, and there's going to be social distancing. We're going to ask people to wear masks. And I'm like, okay, first off, this sounds awful. And I was like, where's the party? And they're like, San Marcos. And Zack can attest, from PB to San Marcos is a trek. It's like almost an hour away.
Yes.
In North County.
Yeah.
So the idea of going to a party where you have to stand outside and socially distance and wear a mask and not really get close to each other for someone's housewarming party an hour away, I was like, I'm not doing this. So I just responded back. I was like,
horrible. Yeah.
I was like, hey, Yvonne, I just got back from traveling, and because they say like you're supposed to quarantine for like 5 days after travel, we're just gonna stay home and make sure that like we don't spread COVID around. They're like, they totally bought it. They were like, oh yeah, that's cool, man. Like, that's really considerate of you. Thanks for thinking about us. Hope you're good. I'm like, yep. I finally got to use COVID as an excuse. So
Yeah.
the one benefit came out of it. So, well, this has been an unbelievable, fun, and heavy conversation. I'm sure we could keep going and talk for like probably another 2 hours. Any final thoughts on COVID from anybody tonight? 3 years later, do we think we've learned anything? Do we think where do we go now after COVID? Now that we're kind of officially out of it and past it now, and it's in the rearview mirror.
This is not.
Oh, so sorry.
We all have learned something. You're right, Camille.
Have others?
I don't know.
We're still voting for the same. I'm not going to go there.
Well, I mean, this is not an answer, and it's not a solution, and it's a downer. So maybe someone has to say after, but I'm sure we all realize, and everyone listening realizes, the amount of damage that public health officials have done. And then they blame, people who question. I was never so anti anything. I'm not a questioner. I'm not anti-authoritarian, anti-government, anti-anything. But I will never hear the word vaccine and think anything of this for the rest of my life. And I think that I don't know if they realize the amount of damage they've done to regular people as far as
public
trusting science and trusting public health and trusting doctors. And then they want to paint as people who were already this way. But at least for me and for many others, I wasn't already this way. Not that there's anything wrong with being this way, but I wasn't. And you got so.
Online that I keep seeing that's like, who? And then it's like, you radicalized me.
Yeah.
That's Natalie.
It's true for lots of things besides COVID, but you're right. Yes, that's me.
Wojak on one side and the Chad on the other side. So.
Can't believe how my body, my choice was used against us until 2020. And then when we tried to flip it,
yeah. Sarah Jacobs is big. She's pushing a bill right now. My body, my data. And it's about protecting one's personal health information, which she had no problem absolutely exposing of people during COVID. But now that's, she's a big proponent of your privacy. And I think that's what I will leave it off on. Pay attention to the flipping of the narratives and how the people that created the problems are going to try to come around and be the saviors of the, solutions. But just, keep our attention spans are so small today in society. And I really think if people just remember and connect those dots, there's not a way in hell any of these people get reelected. because the damage is clear. The science is known that we know lockdowns hurt more people than it helped. Like, we know these things. The economy is still like, I mean, it's arguably on a path downward. And that's, you know, the pandemic certainly jacked the economy. So yeah, just connecting the dots and seeing the perpetrators as the people that they are.
Yeah.
You know what's not cute is those little 2020 toilet paper Christmas ornaments. If you have one of those, your friend, get rid of it.
Oh, we have one of those.
What's that?
We have one of those.
Throw it away.
It says we survived 2020, even though 2020 wasn't the end of it. So
No.
definitely, it was personalized.
Do you have that for 2021 and 2022? And
you keep scratching it out.
Counting.
Just changing it to we survived.
It's like
all
baby's
of
first Christmas.
Camilla, you have any other final thoughts of COVID?
I cannot. I will be silent now.
Okay, outside of Christmas ornaments. Yeah, I think the one thing I kind of always push, and I pushed it, I think, in a post previously, is that the lesson everybody should learn is that when we're given basically free reign to do whatever the state of emergency, they had no hesitation to literally dictate every single aspect of your to govern your life based on their identity and how they think you should live. And I think that should be the biggest lesson people take away from COVID, is that if you continue, we're going to get there eventually if you keep voting this way. But COVID kind of like gave you a sneak preview of 10 years down the line if you keep voting a certain way, where politicians will eventually want to dictate every single part of your life. You can't do this, you can't do that, you can't drive here, you can't go there. And we're still seeing it. We're still seeing it in California. We're still seeing you can't drive here. You can't drive, a certain amount of time because we'll start taxing how many miles you drive. This is bad for you. You can't do this. And it's really, it's just a sneak preview of how bad it can get. And the silver lining, I think, is that a lot of people did kind of their local politics and say, like, okay, who are these people who are making all these decisions? And like school boards are great that people are starting to really quickly. A lot of people are getting more involved in school boards. But lessons, people still haven't learned from COVID, and they just kind of blissfully continue on with their lives. But I think it's important people like us keep talking about it, because people forget and they go, okay, I'm back to normal. COVID's in the rearview mirror. Everything's fine. We made it. But like, we should never forget the lessons and all this craziness that happened from COVID. So that's my final thought. Well, thank you, Natalie and Zach, for joining us. An amazing conversation. I kept looking at the time like, this time is just flying by right now. We're just killing it
really quick. Yep.
So thank you, Natalie and Zach, for coming on.
Thank you.
And conversing. Let's COVID year anniversary to have you guys back on. Open as always. And to anybody who's listening, make sure you like, share, subscribe, review on YouTube, on Spotify, Apple. The best way you can support this show for free, if you love this show and love this content, just send it to somebody, text it to somebody, send to somebody, say, hey, check out this show. I think you'll like it. That's the best way to support this channel for free. And that's basically it. So have a good night, everybody. Later.